Good morning, everyone. There's a lot of talk about consciousness and awareness, and when we're reading spiritual pointers, teachings, the word consciousness and awareness and being and I am and true nature appear a lot of the time. And they're pointing to that part of the human being that is ever present, but is sometimes not able to be grounded into the part of the human being that's ever present and sometimes not recognized. And the funny thing is that it is ever present. It's always here. There's nowhere to go. The spiritual process seems to be a development. It seems to be something that unfolds over a period of time, and definitely things happen over a period of time. One of the most significant happenings is the realization of this that has always been here, that doesn't change, and it happens in an instant. The realization is spontaneous. What is realized doesn't develop. What is realized doesn't grow over time. We don't create it. It doesn't get stronger. What tends to happen is the process removes what's in the way, and at the same time is continually pointing to, oh, have a look, or what you are is this, and uses lots of different words to point to what we are at our core, what's ever present. And that's why there are a lot of teachings, some teachings that make an effort at pointing out the fact there is nowhere to go, there is nothing to do, there is nothing to learn. It doesn't take time. Everyone could leave, in theory, leave today having realized what is here. No one's missing anything. And wherever you happen to be in life, it's there, which is always here. What takes time is for awareness to land on what's here because of the other objects that are saying something else is important. It's not here, it's over there. Once that stops, then that which is ever present and unchanging reveals itself, or is recognized by itself. So I'd like to go through a little meditation or guided meditation that will point at what is here, what's always here, and what is overlooked. And so for the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour, I'm not sure how long we'll be in it, you might all be able to agree that really there's nothing that really needs your attention urgently in the next, let's say, half an hour. That whatever you might think about could really wait half an hour. Does anyone have anything super pressing that they need to think about in the next half an hour, that needs to be solved in the next half an hour?
Make sure the phone is off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I made sure. Okay.
So the reason I say that is because certain thinking patterns include in them an urgency, a sense of urgency, that is not really the case. So a lot of thinking that happens in a way that says, I need to deal with this, I need to think about this. And it isn't the case. Often, sometimes we need to deal with something. And we don't realize that it's not the case. That's why the thinking carries on. So much of our thinking is based on what we would call, or would fall under the category of suffering, the guilt, the blame, the pride, the worry, the expectation. And inherent in it, there is this belief that this is really important, this thinking is essential. And there's the non-recognition that actually this thinking causes nothing but uncomfortableness. So as soon as we consciously realize that this thinking serves no purpose other than to create uncomfortableness in the moment, if that's consciously recognized, then automatically we might start saying, this is not important. Carrying on this thinking is not important. And we might notice on a subconscious level there is the belief it is important. And that can be the introduction of the wisdom or the working mind that starts to see things clearly, in contrast to the misunderstanding that is based on a false idea of who we are and what life is, and therefore what we need, which maybe we don't need, a false idea of what's important, which maybe is far from important. So as these two differing views sit side by side, the wisdom can start undermining the ignorance. So suffering and certain types of thinking are not as urgent as they think. And even thinking about something that needs to happen tomorrow or next week is also maybe not as urgent as we think. And having said that, if the thinking still happens and the thought, this is not so urgent, happens and it doesn't cut off the thinking, so the thinking carries on, we might be able to realize, I'm not in control of my thinking. Is it my thinking? Or is it thinking that is happening as a result of habits and beliefs that are in place as part of the biological mind, brain, and they're just happening like a cookie machine spitting out cookies? Is it me controlling the thoughts? Me as a doer, as a thinker? Or are the thoughts much less personal? So to the extent that certain thinking continues to happen, even though we understand it's not that urgent, who cares? And who's doing the thinking? Allow it to be there. See that some other thinking, which we often think is my thinking, see some other thinking has appeared that says this thinking is not so important. That's not your doing, that's just another thought. It may or may not cut off the obsessive thinking. Just watch it all. So meditation is not something that we need to achieve. Meditation really means to allow everything to be as it is. we can actually live life. Life can be meditation when we allow everything to be as it is, which means understand that what is in each moment is a creation and it's unfolding as a story, as a piece of a masterpiece, and the body and the thoughts are all part of the masterpiece. And even if the body or the thoughts are resisting life, something is watching the whole thing be as it is. And that something is possibly much more intimate than we realize. So, with our eyes open, this is the experience. All that life has ever been is a present moment experience. You've never experienced your life other than right now. There has never existed a past experience of life or a future experience of life. There has only ever been the experience of life, which is always this, whatever this happens to be. So presence is often not recognized because of a whole lot of deeply ingrained unconscious beliefs that we don't even recognize as being beliefs, that keep us not here, not fully here. In a way, the belief that life exists in the past and future is one of those beliefs. If we can come to notice, it's true, life is only ever an experience in the present moment. That's the only time life has been experienced. And in the present moment, there may be an object along with all the other objects. There are different types of objects. We have the visual objects, sound objects, smell and taste and touch objects. The body is a combination of a visual object, a touch object. So the experience right now is primarily a visual experience. And the body is not the subject that is aware of the experience. The body is intrinsically part of the experience. The body is an object in the experience, just like the chair or the tree. So one of the things that keeps us away from being present is this inherent belief, standpoint, that the body is the subject, observing objects at a distance. That's in place because life experience is designed to feel like that, by and large. And that experience can shift, and in the shifting, it can become apparent, oh, what I am is not the body. What I am is that which is aware of the present moment experience. And the body is not separate from the experience. To the extent that the hands are moving. The hands moving are part of the experience in the moment. The experience isn't there and I am here. So if we open our gaze, relax our eyes, and allow everything to fit into the field of vision. And the center of consciousness often is dragged up into what feels like the head. And life is seen in a very focused way out of what feels like it's being looked at out of the head. The center of consciousness is quite happy to drift down to what we could call the chest area. So with your open gaze, you might find yourself visualizing the center of consciousness drifting down towards your chest area. If thoughts are happening, then thoughts are just objects in the present moment experience. The present experience is a multi-sensory experience. So it's made up of many different components. Thoughts are one form of the objects that arise. And just like the physical or the visual objects can be witnessed, the thinking can be witnessed as a component that is intrinsically part of the experience. And the sense of touch is an object in the experience. To the extent that we allow the old belief, the old assumption that that is my sense of touch, that is happening to me, we might start to notice that the object, that the experience contains all sorts of different objects that are witnessed by awareness. Awareness is that which registers the experience. Awareness is not thinking. Thinking about the experience is part of the experience. The thought that arises that says, "Oh, that's an interesting tree," is not awareness of the tree. That is part of the experience, part of the present moment experience. Awareness is much more silent. Awareness doesn't require thought in order to function. This awareness is ever present. For there to be any experience of daily living or of meditation, there must be awareness that recognizes the experience. So the experience is always changing. The content is in constant flux. But what recognizes the constant flux is the awareness that is not affected by what comes and goes. So if you have your eyes open, in just a moment, I'll suggest that we close them. And if you have your eyes closed, at the time when I suggest those with their eyes open, close them. Those with your eyes closed, open them. So be present with the moment as it is now. Be present with the experience, meaning be present with the visual objects, the sound objects, the thought objects, the feeling objects, the whole experience as it is. And now change your eyes from being closed to open or open to closed. And be present with the new experience. The experience has changed radically. If you had your eyes closed, there were very few visual components to the experience. And then you, what we call open eyes, and the whole experience is radically changed from no visual objects to a flood of visual objects. And vice versa, you had your eyes open, there was a flood of visual objects in your experience, and they suddenly vanished. And what remains present is the awareness that is aware of the present moment experience, regardless of its content. So if we all close our eyes, for some the experience has now changed radically. What I mean by experience is the combination of content and awareness of that content. Awareness of content is experience. And so with our eyes closed, and even that terminology is not so accurate when we are completely present with what is. In meditation, with what we call eyes closed, there very often is a whole series of assumptions and beliefs that superimpose themselves on the present moment and prevent a recognition of the experience as it really is. So the assumption that I have eyes which are closed may well be present in the meditation. But if we try to confirm that based on the experience as it is right now, where are the eyes? And don't mistake a memory or a belief that says, well, of course, I have eyes. What we are doing is confirming everything based on what the experience confirms. So we might notice that what we might think is the back of our eyelids, that we are looking into the back of our eyelids, is vast open space. A space with no edges and no boundaries. And there is awareness of that space. We might find that there is a assumption that still says, well, there is an inside and an outside. The assumption that says I'm sitting on a chair, meditating with my eyes closed, and I am aware of inside or the back of my eyelids, and there is an outside. That is a belief that exists in the present moment that's not confirmable right now. All there is inside. The belief about how life is, that life is an objective reality, might be saying that the sound objects that arise in your present moment experience are coming from outside. That the sound is coming from a person that is somewhere sitting in a room. Where is this room? Where is the other person? Where is the outside? The sound object arises out of nothing in that space of awareness, just like all the visual objects, when they are present, flood that space. So the sound objects arise out of the space and subside back into the space. And the sensation that is there in the space that the brain might be labeling, or thought might be labeling as my thigh pressing against the chair. We might realize, well, that's just a sensation. That when I'm present with the sensation, tells me nothing about a chair and a thigh. It's only the overlaying of a thought based on a memory, or a thought which is a memory, that says there is a body sitting in a chair, in a room, in a world, and I just have my eyes closed. That's a thought object arising in the present moment that has the capacity to completely obscure what is actually here. What is undeniably here in this present moment is the awareness of the experience, however it happens to be, and the sense of existence. If the thought, I am a body sitting in a chair, has been seen as just a thought, not an accurate representation of the experience as it's being experienced in this moment, then we might notice that the experience of a body in a room, in a chair, is not present. At best, there are some indistinct sensations that are assumed to be all of that. And yet the awareness is undeniable, and the sense of existence is undeniable. Something exists, but what exists when we are present with the sense of existence isn't what exists isn't described. In the sense itself. The sense of existence doesn't say that it is male or female. It doesn't say that it is a certain age. It doesn't say that it has certain preferences. And yet if the question arises, the question is a sound object in the space. The question arises, are you dead? You don't need to conceptualize or think about the answer. The undeniable sense of existence is here. I am. I exist. Not I as anything defined. The experience doesn't define what the I that exists is. Awareness and the sense of existence, the two basic characteristics of consciousness. Not consciousness of the body, but the consciousness in which everything arises. Everything arises in consciousness, is recognized by consciousness and made of consciousness. And awareness is the primary function of that consciousness which recognizes the experience as it is. And if certain thoughts are there, the thoughts are very powerful objects in the experience and can dictate what the experience is experienced like. And there's some of these thoughts that are very good at preventing us from being present with what is, fall away, and are seen to be just thought objects that are often very inaccurate relative to the experience as it happens to be right now. Then what is really here has more chance of being seen and recognized. awareness and the sense of existence. The two basic aspects of consciousness that are ever present in every experience, never absent. We might notice that some assumptions about the world can get carried into the meditation. An assumption that the world exists as an objective reality, that the world is outside of me, that the universe is very big, that I am a human with a body of a certain gender and age. To the extent that that exists in this present moment, we could call that a residual self-image that is superimposing itself on this present moment experience and quite possibly preventing the experience from being experienced as it really is. Where is this world? Where is this universe right now? The experience is one of vast, formless space, which is not a space defined by objects, maybe we could call it spaceless space. And the awareness is not separate from that space. And if we're trying to see the present moment using thought, trying to understand by thinking about it, that thinking is an object arising that is likely to obscure the awareness which is always functioning as awareness prior to thought. Awareness will never become aware of itself through thought. Everything arises in awareness, arises out of awareness, and then subsides back into awareness. When you're ready, open your eyes and notice that the experience has radically changed. A world has suddenly appeared. Bodies, including what we might call my body, has appeared. And now close your eyes. The whole world has disappeared. The experience has changed radically in content. There are no bodies. And yet there is that awareness which is prior to thinking. The awareness is aware of any thinking that might happen. And if thinking is not happening, the awareness and its functioning carries on. This residual self-image, which is a belief of what the world is as an objective reality, the belief of what I am as a body, is what is carried into each moment and prevents the experience being recognized for what it is, content recognized by awareness. What might seem scary, what might seem like the collapse of the world as we know it, replaced by this vast emptiness, is only scary if there is the non-recognition of the sense of existence. To the extent that awareness recognizes the undeniable sense of existence, even in the absence of thought, the absence of a body, and the absence of a world. To the extent that there is awareness of the sense of existence, there's nothing to be afraid of. Because I am, as that sense of existence, what I am is formless and untouched by any object that might arise, untouched by the absence of any object. The sense of existence doesn't have any sense of lack in it. We might come to notice that actually what I am is complete, and in the absence of thought, peaceful. And if there's any fear or anxiety, agitation or discomfort, maybe it can be noticed as a object arising in the present moment, part of the experience and therefore experienced exactly for what it is. You might notice that the fear at its core includes a belief or a series of thoughts that are saying something like, well, who am I if I'm not a body? And if those thoughts aren't there, then there is just being. Awareness is happy to let everything be as it is, witnessing the experience as it is. So this experience, where there are very few visual objects, maybe even very few thought objects, very few sound objects, is not the typical daily life experience. We could call it an impersonal experience. The body is not present. And yet, awareness of the experience is there and the sense of existence is there. And opening our eyes, the whole world re-emerges. And this is the daily life experience. The same awareness is aware of this experience. This experience includes a particular object in it, which appears to be a vehicle through which the consciousness is functioning. In order for the experience to appear to be an experience viewed from a particular perspective, and the experience includes the sense that I am this, and life is meant to be lived. as if this is what I am. Maybe recognizing that daily life is an experience in each moment. And included in the experience is the body. But at the core of the experience, at the core of the personal consciousness experience, the living life as Roger, the body. At the core of that is the awareness and the sense of existence. That is the core of who I am and the core of every human being. To the extent that we live life disconnected from that core, unaware by and large that those aspects of consciousness are present, we're forced to live life in such a way where we only identify with the physical aspect of the human being. We believe ourselves to be limited to that. The flow of life, which is pleasure sometimes and pain at others, is what adds or subtracts to the physical aspect of the human being, to the extent that we only know ourselves as that physical aspect. Life is very good at some times and very bad at other times. Good and bad, when we believe ourselves to be the physical, means an addition to what I am, or a subtraction from what I am. To the extent we only know ourselves as the physical aspect, the flow of life is either a supporting of what I am or an attacking of what I am, what I believe myself to be. To the extent that awareness becomes aware of itself, awareness becomes aware of the awareness function that recognizes the experience in each moment. Awareness has to be ever present for daily living to be experienced. To the extent that it's aware of itself and the inherent sense of existence, then we can come to know ourselves as a human being, which at its core is not physical. At its core is always the same. The core of the human being was the same at 3 years old, at 10 years old, at 40 years old, at 80 years old. The same fullness, completeness, the same sense of existence that is, I am, even when circumstance is unfortunate. If there is the good fortune to be able to ground back into our being, we find, I am. Even as I've missed my aeroplane, or the far more tragic aspects of life, someone that we love dearly has died, or our physical possessions have been lost, which on the surface seem to be an attack on who I am if we only know ourselves to be the physical. In the face of these tragedies that do happen as part of the flow of life, we ground into the non-physical aspect of ourself. I find, I am. So especially if the stories about what this circumstance means to me fall away. find there really is no problem with my existence. My existence hasn't been cut in half, hasn't been diminished. The circumstance is unfortunate. It will be painful. But that pain, if it is not identified with as an attack on my being, won't turn into suffering. So the human being can be described as the combination or the result of impersonal consciousness of Source that at its essence, at its core, has two attributes. The faculty of awareness and the functioning or the faculty of existence. The human being is the impersonal, the one impersonal consciousness of Source that has linked, identified itself with a particular body, which is a vehicle, and then functions through that body, and the result is the personal consciousness experience. Just like white light going through a red filter and coming out as red light. The red filter is akin to the body vehicle that has its personal characteristics. The white light is the impersonal consciousness of Source that has no characteristics other than the sense of existence and the awareness function. And when the two meet, the result is the red light. And in essence, the red light is white light. But in experience, it's red light. So the experience that we have is the personal experience. It's meant to be the personal experience. To the extent that we can find an awareness of the impersonal functions or the impersonal aspects of consciousness within the personal consciousness experience, we come to understand the essence of the personal experience as being impersonal consciousness. And so when the body dies, as part of the story of life, what dies is a vehicle, a filter, through which consciousness has linked and is functioning. To the extent that I know myself on not only the physical level, but importantly on the non-physical, the consciousness level, then I'll understand that when the red filter is destroyed, the white light, which is the essence of the personal consciousness experience, is untouched. And so Roger-ness dies with the body. The personal aspects are a direct result of the vehicle. The vehicle has its genes and up-to-date conditioning, which includes its preferences, which includes all of the biological reactions that happen in a particular moment. It also includes all of the psychological aspects of the human being, the fears, the resistances, the taking life personally. And the personal consciousness experience is therefore coloured by the vehicle. And in life, the vehicle is always changing, always being reconditioned by life. And so the personality is always changing. Some aspects of it remain fairly constant. But things like the fears and the beliefs about who we are and what life is, that's part of the body's conditioning. And life can radically change those aspects of the conditioning. And if that's the case, the personal consciousness experience changes accordingly. So anyone's experience of life can be called their personal consciousness experience. And that is dictated by the body, not by the impersonal consciousness. The impersonal consciousness doesn't have these characteristics. So when the body dies, the personal dies with it. But the essence of the personal remains unaffected. So death is really the end of a personal experience, which is not an attack on who I am if it's recognized that the foundation of the personal experience is impersonal consciousness that doesn't die. Impersonal consciousness was never born and never dies. The vehicle is born. The impersonal consciousness links to the vehicle and starts having a personal experience. And that is like a ride, like a virtual reality story with a beginning and an end and everything in between. And death is simply the end of the story. And we can see how radically different the belief can be compared to the actuality. The belief is I am a separate independent entity, physical mainly, and that when the body dies, well, that is a complete attack on who I am. And therefore there is a fear of death, and a fear of death really means a fear of life, because at any moment life can impact us in such a way that pain is delivered, and pain is essentially a mini death, or received as a mini death, which is why there is a resistance to the flow of life when it is delivering pain, and that fear persists even when life is delivering pleasure, because the thinking is, well, what will happen when this pleasure ends? Or I'm worried about what's going to come in the future. And those thoughts can disturb even moments that are full of pleasure. And to the extent that life is seen differently, life is seen differently when we know that what I am at my core is not threatened by what happens in the flow of life. Even death is not an assault on what I am at my core. And so when death is imminent, not as a concept, not as something that says, oh, there's nothing to worry about when I die, because when I die, what I am at my core isn't touched. If we've just got it as an intellectual concept and we say that, it's not going to override the fear that would arise when the identity, the belief of who I am is still in place. But when the identity is still in place, which is a set of beliefs about who I am that are limited and not very accurate, then imminent death is going to create fear. And the concept, what I am at my core is not affected by death. What I am at my core is impersonal. No matter how frantically or repeatedly we say it, it won't have an effect on the fear. To the extent that we know ourself at our core, which really means finding ourselves dropping into that space, dropping into that field that is outside of thinking. That space that is there and not defined by us judging the experience, but rather allowing the experience to be as it is, and for awareness to just do what awareness does, which is witness. And allow the thinking to stop, realizing the experience of life doesn't require me to think. For the experience to be there, for the visual objects to be there, I don't need to say, that is a tree, that is a nice tree, that is good food, that is not good food. To the mind, to the extent the mind quiets down, we realize our awareness is still there. Which doesn't mean that we have to live life with no thinking, but for the period of time where we are starting to realize that there is this field of being, at first it's important for the thinking to be transcended, because the thinking is powerful enough, especially when we're not familiar with this other way of being. The thinking is strong enough to prevent us from resting there. And at some point we find that, I'm able to rest there and able for thinking to happen. Thinking, not of the thinking mind, but of the working mind. The thinking mind is the part of the mind that is filled with all the false ideas of who I am, the false ideas of what life is as an objective reality. I am the body only. This is a world that is objective and never disappears. When all of those beliefs are in the thinking mind and are functioning, well then our being is obscured. But a whole lot of other thinking, functional thinking, that works out things that are necessary in order for life to unfold, that thinking doesn't obscure our being. And once we're grounded in the being, we can find ourselves having conversations, still remaining grounded in our being. We can find ourselves thinking about practical matters that need to be addressed. So both a simultaneous outward attention on the world and thinking that is functional happening, and at the same time awareness being focused inwardly on itself and on the sense of existence, sense of being. And so to the extent that there is this grounding in, we know ourselves as that. We are that. So that's direct knowing. That's not the knowing that we get given when someone reads information to us and the brain understands it. This is the knowing of being. We can know an object that is at a distance, and we know it through perception. And then once it's perceived, we can have ideas about it. And so that's one form of knowing. That's an intellectual knowledge about an object. To know what I am doesn't require me to have an idea. I can't see myself at a distance. What I am is what I am. So I can know myself intimately because of a very important fact, that what I am at my core is awareness, or at least one of the primary facets of what I am at my core is awareness. So awareness can be aware of itself only because the essence of consciousness is awareness. That's why consciousness can be aware of itself, which means know itself at no distance. That's being. So we don't have an opinion about what I am. So the question, who am I, isn't a question that we can answer with thinking. The question, who am I, is not an answer that I can, or it's not a question I can give an answer to by writing down an essay on who I am. The answer to who am I is to be. And in that moment of being, I am. I know I am. That being is the answer. And when there is the being what I am at my core, the question, who am I, doesn't arise. The question, who am I, arises when there is the obstruction, the covering up of who I am, or the knowing of who I am. And so then the question says, well, actually, I don't know who I am. I'm lost. And then a search, an intuitive search happens. A search to know oneself. A search away from the false idea of what I am, the false beliefs of what I am. Primarily beliefs that I am the doer, the other is the doer, and that my happiness is to be found in outcomes, in pleasure, 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 pleasure. That's the self-image that is basically inaccurate. And life dissolves the self-image and reveals the truth. And when we rest there, we realize, I am, regardless of the circumstance. I don't need something to happen in the future to be. I am right now. So then we come to know ourselves as complete in each moment. And out of that being, when the other thoughts are not absent, there is a self-contentedness, peace, and an enoughness. And so then seeking stops. Essentially, when we aren't connected, there is a sense of incompleteness and uncomfortableness, and that incompleteness and uncomfortableness stems from the self-image that is present. And of course we're going to be uncomfortable with a self-image, because the self-image is not what we are. It's an idea of what we are. And we can never describe, we can try to describe an object, and even if we describe it in a lot of detail and very accurately, the description is not the object itself. And a self-image is just a description of what we are, and the bigger problem is it's a very inaccurate and limited description of who we are. So to the extent we only know ourselves according to our self-image, we're bound to feel uncomfortable because it's like a glove that doesn't fit. And so the falling away of the self-image, which really means to realize that this thinking, obsessive thinking, is the self-image. The thinking stems from the self-image. The thinking is not separate from the self-image and is continually reinforcing the self-image. And to the extent we realize all this thinking is based on a belief of who I am, a belief I am the doer, the other is the doer, and my happiness is to be found in pleasure. And therefore, when life delivers pain through the other, I have to hate them because I see them as the doer, I see that they've delivered pain. My belief is that I need pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. So hatred, which is or blame, which is a form of thinking, comes up towards the other, we feel it in our body, and that thought is effectively saying, yes, what I need is pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. What you are is another person that is separate and in control, that has chosen to hurt me. You could have done it differently. You could have delivered pleasure to me, which would be an addition to what I am. And that thinking just continues to reinforce this false self-image. And if awareness lands on this thinking and sees it as it's all relative thinking, the thinking is produced by a brain that has experienced life a particular way, and perceived life a particular way, perceived it based on the surface experience of life, and has put in place these beliefs. And the beliefs are not accurate according to the pointers that are pointing to life as it's able to be seen when the beliefs fall away. And so the teachings are saying, look below the surface, take a closer look, check out whether the belief systems that are in place are accurate. And upon close investigation, we'll find that belief about me is not accurate, that belief about me is not accurate, that belief is not accurate. And as soon as the inaccurate is seen as inaccurate, as soon as a lie is seen as a lie, then there's a new relationship to it. But for as long as a lie is believed to be true, as long as something that is inaccurate is assumed to be accurate, then it remains in place and it remains related to as if it's truth. And no idea about ourselves can be absolute. It's no idea about the world can be absolute. They're all relative. Relative means it's produced by a relative instrument. The brain is a biological instrument that is very relative. All of the sense perceptions that have perceived the world are very relative. Even if you have what's called 20/20 vision, that might be as good as human eyes get, but if the eye was a much more complex instrument, it could see with much more detail, maybe. And so we can see we start off with 20/20 vision and then it becomes blurry vision. So our vision is relative. It's not telling us, it's not allowing us to see something absolutely. And so the whole process of perception and cognition is by nature relative, which doesn't mean that all thinking is pointless and useless. A lot of thinking and a lot of perception is more than adequate in order for us to live life practically. So this isn't saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, that all thinking is flawed and useless because it's relative. It's just that we need to become clear that for certain tasks, relative thinking is more than fine. Even to understand very complex laws of physics in such a way that allows us to utilize them in daily living. because we probably don't understand the laws of physics absolutely, or I don't even need to say probably don't. We don't understand the laws of physics absolutely, but we can understand them in a relative way such that that relative understanding helps us very much in life. When it comes to knowing ourselves, which is something absolute, then relying on perception is not going to suffice. So what that means is that we come to realize any idea about myself, any thought about life and how it should be, is a relative thought, and I'm not going to believe it as truth. And some thoughts about ourself and life are not only relative, but they're just completely wrong. When we investigate using the relative senses, and we investigate closely to see whether I'm in control, we see, based on a very simple investigation, the human being in any moment is one way, and the factors that make them that one way in a particular moment are their genes and up-to-date conditioning. They're the two factors that make the human being what they are in any particular moment on a biological and psychological level. We can see that our genes and up-to-date conditioning were not something I had control over. I wasn't in control of the genes that I received. I wasn't in control of the parents I was born to. And I'm not in control of how life impacts me moment after moment after moment after moment from the moment I was born, which makes me what I am in each moment. Those two factors make me what I am in each moment, completely out of my control. And then the body on this biological and psychological level finds itself in a circumstance completely out of my control as to, whether a bird flies past or whether a, big band of loud music goes past. I witness what is in the situation, not in my control. And the combination of the circumstance plus my genes and up-to-date conditioning creates a reaction. A reaction that ordinarily I would say, before an investigation, that is my choice. That is my doing. I had that thought. I made that comment. And a simple investigation shows, wow, that comment was forced to come out based on the circumstance and my genes and up-to-date conditioning. And that thought that I had, which I refer to as my thought, is a reaction, a response that has to happen that way based on the makeup of the body in that situation. So a simple belief about myself and the other, that I am the doer of everything that I think, everything that I feel, everything I say, everything I act, and that the other is the doer, effectively meaning a separate independent entity in control of everything, meaning that there is a controller inside that is unaffected by anything else, so whatever they decide is seen to be their own autonomy and their own volition. And an investigation shows there is no such controller with autonomy and volition. What happens in each moment is completely determined by these two factors that are completely determined by everything that came before. So we see, wow, this belief about myself, a very core belief about myself, on a simple investigation, is absolutely wrong. So then, knowing myself is not coming up with another belief that says, I am out of control. So if we replace the belief, I am in control, with the belief, I am out of control, and then I start living through that belief, we end up with another dysfunction. This in its in one form, well, I am in control, leads to pride and leads to shame. Pride if what happens through me is positive. Look what I did. I'm in control, so this is all my doing. Look how good it is, and that's pride. And on the same principle of I am in control, when life happens through me and it's not positive, then we have shame. Look what I did. Look how bad it is. I'm worthless, I'm useless. And to the extent that I am in control gets turned into I have no control, then we might find ourselves living as a very irresponsible person, doing things that hurt a lot of people, saying, well, this is destiny and I'm not in control. Or you might find someone who's taken on that belief that lives life with a deep sense of despair. I'm completely out of control. And there's no point. And I'm helpless. And so the suggestion here is not that we drop this belief and take up a new belief. For a while, a new belief might be put in place by life, that I am not the doer. That new belief, I am not the doer, is useful to some extent because it starts to undermine the belief I am the doer, which is what we generally start off with. And then, once this is undermined, if the belief I am not the doer is put in place, at some point it will be recognized as causing suffering, and hopefully there will be the recognition, what I am exists independent of the belief I am the doer or I'm not the doer. You can drop both ideas. What are you if you drop both ideas, that I am the doer and I'm not the doer? Then I am as I am. So in the story of the burning bush, where Moses found this burning bush talking to him, giving him messages, he was quite startled and he says, "Who are you?" And so burning bush is a representation of Source or God. And the answer is a very important answer. God knowing itself. So God, the burning bush, is a representation of wisdom. I am that I am. Didn't say, well, I am this or that with these characteristics. I am that I am. Which really means, I don't need to describe, I can't describe, I can just be. And in being, I am whatever I am, prior to any label of what I am. Another example of this is that in some therapies, if someone is got very low sense of self-worth, let's say, the therapy could be, or it might not be a therapy, even spiritual circles, right? And I'm talking about, this will apply to a woman in this case. The therapist will say, actually, you're a goddess. You know, what you are is divine. You're a goddess, and so you will hear people reaffirming to themselves, "I'm a goddess." It's there to counter the ingrained belief, that's completely the opposite to that I'm worthless. And so the therapy will say, no, you're a goddess. Remember that. Come to see that. And so there's an affirmation of it. And the affirmation serves a purpose. But to the extent that someone then goes around believing that they are a goddess instead of being what is being referred to as goddessness, then the belief I'm a goddess is another mask, another self-image. And it doesn't help when life is really tough. The belief I'm a goddess goes out the window, and but to the extent that pointer to what you are is used as a pointer, not as a belief, and there's a grounding into the completeness of what we are at our core, then there's a knowing which is prior to any labeling or after any label. Drop any labels. Drop the opposing labels, and what are you? You are, I am. I've spoken for a long time. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, can we...
I just wanted to ask you about the energy of that I have sometimes and I'm having right now. It's really hard for me to believe that this is a real environment when this energy is here. I know intellectually there are people listening to me right now and looking at me or whatever, but it doesn't feel like that it's real. And this tends to happen at the end of satsangs or towards the end of the retreat, where I feel like I just can't think. And I try to talk to people, sometimes I definitely can't learn. And I don't know, sometimes when I feel this way, it's hard for me driving, just because I do know that I'm on a road and I need to, there is a knowing that there would be cause and effect but there's just this complete and total, just doesn't make sense. And then I try to just say, just relax. You don't need to know what it is, but still I'm asking. So, because I've never been in it when I was near a teacher to ask.
You were never.
I've never been like this when I'm in the presence of a teacher to ask. So it seemed like something I should maybe try to get your feedback on.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing not to drive you see it's dangerous to drive when you're in that state. And the process does tend to disable certain functions, human faculties, in order for certain experiences to be present that allow us to recognize what might not ordinarily be recognized. So, to the extent that there is awareness lands on what is being demonstrated in the state you're describing. So what you'll find is that the awareness and the sense of existence, even when certain bodily functions, faculties are not operative, that awareness and sense of existence is still here.
It just feels really still. But I don't feel like the I am piece in the body yet. I just feel like everything's like this. Like I'm looking through like a character in a snow globe, but then I'm actually this out here looking through this right now. But
So that's that's one of these experiences where the centralization of consciousness or awareness shifts outside of the body and is much less personal in experience. And there's nothing to worry about. It really just is a peak experience that is demonstrating a sort of behind the scenes look at what the fundamental nature of life is, which is an experience recognized by awareness, and that everything that previously was taken to be objective and real is then, from that witnessing perspective, recognized to be an arising inside the awareness that witnesses it. And so your sense is that you are the awareness that is witnessing everything as an arising. So the center of consciousness has shifted outside of the body and is aware of the complete moment, the complete experience, and the body is an object in that experience. Is that then about right?
yeah, and it just feels really like I'm actually sleeping, but that I know I'm not because I'm not, but I feel like I'm sleeping. So I'm confused, I think, but yeah, I want it to stop doing this because it does this a lot, but I guess I shouldn't be resisting anything, so.
So does it feel unpleasant?
No, it just feels abnormal, like I want to fit in, like I want to be normal, like I don't, but then I know, yeah, it just feels kind of isolating to the body. Because I don't have the I am piece yet. It's just the awareness piece. There's someone here. Jin. Now I don't feel this lonely. Okay, thank you.
If you want to put more words onto it, if you think that will be useful, feel free.
So sometimes as a kid, maybe I disassociate from the situation. So maybe it's triggering that. It makes me scared when it shouldn't. Because it's not the same at all.
There is a difference between dissociation and witnessing. And to the extent that there can be a recognition of the awareness and the sense of existence, then inevitably these experiences come back into the body. And to me, the purpose is to show us how the experience is exactly that. It's an experience. The experience can be an experience of being centralized, of consciousness being centralized in the body and then experiencing life from that perspective. And the shift can show us, wow, the experience can change where what I am is everywhere and not located in the body, that the body is just an object. And the two of them, they're both experiences. One is an experience of formless awareness. We could call it a oneness experience in one respect. And it's an experience. Often when subject-object tends to fall away, we assume, oh, this is reality, this is outside of experience. Experience has fallen away, and now this is reality. It's not, they're both experiences. One is a oneness experience, meaning an experience designed to feel exactly as it feels, and the other is a experience of duality, where there's a separation, subject-object separation. They're both experience. All of life is only ever experience, designed and experienced exactly as it's created. And so there's a lot of insight that can come out of seeing the shift and coming to see, oh wow, life is always experience. And the crucial element of experience is the awareness. You can't have experience without awareness of the experience. So whenever there's any experience, there's always awareness of the experience. And to become aware of that element of the experience is to become aware of the subjectivity of the experience. That's the subject. And even though what you described is, in that particular experience, there was less of the being component, less of the I am component. But with awareness, there is always I am. If it can be covered up, and so the awareness aspect can be a significant part of the experience, and the I am can be subtle or obscured. To the extent that we come to know that with awareness there is always I amness. If we're looking for I amness as the belief I am such and such, which can be a very condensed form of I amness, I am this and this, then we might overlook the more subtle I amness that is ever present. And in any experience, there is always awareness and existence. They're the fundamental constants in experience. And as awareness becomes aware of this I exist and this awareness, then there's much less to fear.
Yeah, I just don't feel it in my body, so maybe it's in the awareness, but it's hard. It just feels like spacious and like, so I just want to make sure it's like not something I should go to the hospital for.
It's not a problem, but if you want to come back, you just come back. Yeah? So, if we lose, sometimes if the ground gets taken out from under you and you're not familiar with not being there, it can be scary. So don't force anything. There are different forms of moving across, and usually new platforms are created for you to step onto. If a platform is taken away and you're left with nothing, it can cause more damage. So don't push yourself too far. But also, to an extent, I have a lot of trust with the process. So, especially if you find yourself in these sort of situations, life is putting you in a place where the old beliefs are being challenged and new conditioning is coming in, and it can feel uncomfortable at times. But my experience is that if you find yourself in these situations, generally you can relax and trust.
So what you were just saying now about the experience of oneness and the experience of being localized, that they are both experiences. I was a little bit... So my experience during the meditation, when you were taking us into the sensations, was the feeling that the sensation was localized. Whether it's, even without the label, my body, just the feeling of it being localized. And then when you took us to the awareness in the sense of existence, then it's not that the sense of localization expanded, it just flipped to a non-local experience. But there was something that you said earlier when you were taking us into the sensation where it was a sensation of touch. And then you said something like, see the belief that this is my sense of touch. And I wasn't sure, does that mean that the feeling of it being localized is a belief or an assumption? Or is it just the label that it is the sensation belongs to me or my body?
So if you close your eyes now and put the hand that doesn't exist in your experience onto your knee. So you can move it, yeah. And yeah. So if you keep your eyes closed and you're present with the experience as it actually is. You're hearing sound, and there can be an assumption that the sound is outside of you, coming from an object outside of you. But the sound is actually registered inside that space of awareness. But a residual self-image about what we believe the world to be and what we believe ourselves to be as a human being in the world can remain in the meditation. And it may not be seen as a belief or a thought that is arising in the meditation, because it's like when we spoke last week, the belief that I am male. And someone would say, well, that's not a belief, you are male. And from one perspective, yes, but from another perspective, in a meditation, for example, when the body falls away and there is no sense of being male and there is a sense of being formless awareness, well then the male aspect is not part of the experience. And so what happens is what we assume to be truth, which means truth is something that is always right, always accurate. Whichever way you look at it, truth is always accurate. Whereas so much of our thinking is not truth, it's not absolute. It can be accurate from one perspective, and then from another perspective it's not so accurate. And those beliefs that are assumed to be truth get carried into the meditation and are there and keep the experience limited to the belief. So basically, in meditation, for a long time in meditation, the belief I am a body, I am a human experiencing, that belief will be present in the meditation. And for us to see that that's a residual self-image, it's a residual idea of who I am that's existing still in the meditation. And so what I was pointing at is to become present with the experience as it is, and don't believe any thoughts. Don't believe any assumptions based on memory. So we might have a memory of functioning in the world, and if we take that memory to be a reflection of truth, then, because when we're functioning in the world, yes, I am a body. In the meditation, the memory, I am a body, the memory of being a body in the world, gets superimposed in the space where there is no body and there is no world. And the same with sensation. So with your eyes closed, the experience is that there is sensation of touch, hand on knee. And then a memory and a thought says, that is my hand on my knee. And as soon as that thought's there, then essentially inside the meditation there is a thought image of a hand and a knee, and then inevitably there's, the image is, oh well, if there's a knee then there's a shin and the thigh, and then at the end of the shin there's the ankle, and then there's a foot and there's toes, and then, and the whole image of a whole body is in the meditation. But if we're present with the sense of the sensation as just a sensation in the meditation, and don't superimpose any labels or beliefs or memories onto the sensation, and just be completely present with the sensation, you'll find it doesn't tell you very much. The sensation doesn't say it's a hand and a knee. The sensation is just a sensation of touch. You can even drop, you drop the word sensation, you drop the word touch. It just is what it is.
Well, I noticed that when I stick to just what I'm experiencing, then it's very simple, like you said. But then when that experience is used to point at some of the assumptions that I had, like that the world is real and that there is such a thing as a body, that's where the resistance would come up, because it's a seeing that, like, I didn't even recognize those things as beliefs, basically, or assumptions. And then when they're questioned, there's a sort of dissonance or resistance. One thing I wanted to clarify also was when you say that the objects, that the body is not the subject, and that everything is an object in awareness, including the body. Is it correct to say that the body is a particular object through which the other objects are perceived, though?
Depends on the meditation and the state. So if it can be, the experience can shift a lot like what Annette was describing, such that it becomes clear that the body is simply an object and it's not doing the perceiving. Mm-hmm. That awareness does perceiving. So we could, the pointer can be to try and dislodge some of the beliefs that are in place. We believe because the experience is that the eyes see, that the eyes are doing the seeing. Drop that belief. And in this moment, where are your eyes that are seeing? But seeing is happening. So I'm not suggesting that your eyes don't see. But just be with the experience as it is. And the purpose of the exercise is this is not to suggest we will live life like this. I'm not even saying that the world isn't real. But in the exercise, it's to question beliefs and see that I don't know. And the loosening of a belief can bring in presence, and the exercise is really, the purpose of the exercise was always pointing at the faculty of awareness and the sense of existence. The exercise isn't so much there so that we live life like that, but so that there can be an awakening to these aspects of consciousness that are very often not registered as being there. And then an integration happens once those aspects are registered. Then an integration comes where we say, oh, but the experience is that the body perceives. And then I completely agree. We could, when we're living life, I would say, yeah, the body perceives. The experience is that the body is perceiving the object, and the body is the subject. But now, when we've become aware of the awareness aspect that is functioning through the body, when we say the body perceives, we maybe are aware of the awareness that is the root of perception.
Right. So I can see that it's the awareness that's perceiving through the body, but to deny that, I just have a hard time denying the reality of the body, that there is a certain reality to the body that
I completely agree. I don't. This is not the core of the teaching. So I don't think it's very balanced to say the body doesn't exist. It's a valid teaching method, but I completely agree with you that from a position of critical thinking, it doesn't hold water to say the body is not real. Within a exploration, within a particular meditation, where we say, okay, for this half an hour I'm going to be completely present with what is, and I'm not going to add any assumptions onto what is based on memories of how life is outside of this half an hour.
So I think that's where I'm trying to discriminate between what are my assumptions and what's my actual experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still experience what I I guess I'm not sure if I'm experiencing beliefs or if I'm experiencing actual objects.
This is the investigation. If you close your eyes now, anyone close their eyes, and we're really present, I'd say, in this moment, in this experience, where is the body? And you can't find it. If there's a belief in that space that says the body is sitting in a chair, absolutely, then what will be there is the impression, in a sense, of a body, a belief of a body. And that belief can, in a sense, almost make the body present. But with eyes closed, then we go, let's just go to the experience. The visual aspect of the body is not there. And so by and large, our experience of the body is various sensations. We see the body with our eyes, or there is perception of the body, and it's visual. And then there's the touch components of the body that match up with the visual aspect of the body. And so touch and vision are the two sensory components of the experience where the body is essentially comes into existence. So with the eyes closed, and if you're not moving, and the touch, like if you're not really touching anything in particular, or touching very lightly, the body, the experience of the body has fallen away. So if we're present with the experience as it is presenting itself, we say, there is no body. But what is undeniable in the experience is the awareness of no body, and even in the absence of a body, there is the undeniable sense of existence. Something exists, but what exists? The sense of existence doesn't say, the body exists in it. If we're convinced that the sense of existence says, I'm the body in it, then what's present is the sense of existence plus a deeply ingrained belief about what life is, an objective reality with a body in it. And so I'm not saying that life isn't that. I'm just saying, see it as, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
I think what I was trying to and I realize I'm using my thinking here, but is that okay? my experience is that perception happens through the body, that awareness is perceiving through the body. And then the question came up, then what is perceiving the body? Like what is the body then? And with eyes closed, I can only sense these sensations, like you said, that seem to be localized somewhere. And that don't have these, that are very vague sensations. They're not as clearly defined as I assume them to be when my eyes are open. And then when you point to the awareness in the sense of I am, even the sensations seem to fall away. So there isn't even the localized sensations that I would call my body. And so, but then when I come back to, like when you had us open our eyes again, the perceptions are there again. And so there's this, switching, not switching back and forth. It's not that, like you're saying, the awareness doesn't disappear, but a fading from the foreground to the background. And so I just originally my question started with when you were talking about how these are both experiences, both the oneness experience and the dual experience of being localized. Is that what you're referring to? That was basically my question.
Well, what I'm referring to in the both experiences is that the content is radically different. How it feels is radically different. But the content is still awared by awareness. Whether it's an experience whereby it feels like subject-object and it feels like the body is the subject, whether it's that experience or whether it's an experience that shifts and there's no subject-object and it doesn't feel like the body is the subject. That's just a different feeling experience. And this is important because in order to bring about those shifts, some teachings will talk about experience versus when experience falls away. And so in that case, experience is being defined as the experience where there is a sense of subject-object. So when there's a sense of the body being the subject, then that's called experience. And so when life brings about a shift and the subject-object component of the experience falls away, then we stop calling it experience, because the definition of the word experience as used in that context is experiences where there is subject-object relationship. And then it says reality is that the body is not the subject. Reality is that everything arises in awareness. And when we're contemplating this, at some point the subject-object component of the experience collapses. And that could be what is referred to as an awakening experience. The experience changes and it's like, oh, what I am is the awareness that is aware of all objects and the body is just an object. That this awareness that I am is aware of. And I always thought that I was the body. So the awareness that is localized in the body, or at least the experience that makes it seem like the awareness is localized in the body, changes, and the experience now feels like the awareness is delocalized, that the awareness is everywhere. And when that experience happens, one of the significant hallmarks or characteristics of that is that awareness recognizes itself as delocalized from the body. And then the belief, I am the body, starts to be challenged because the experience is showing something different. But often it's not called experience. That when that happens, it's called the end of experience. The subject-object is experience, and now this is the end of experience when this oneness happens. The end of which, to me, is problematic, because then we don't realize that all of life, even if we're having a oneness experience, is an experience. If we stop calling it experience because subject-object component has fallen away, then the assumption is this is reality. Now this is reality. There is no reality. There's only ever experience.
Well, I've heard it described, and maybe this is not what you're referring to, but I've heard it described as consciousness experiencing itself. So it's still an experience, but it's an experience of, rather than experience like going outward, it's an inward but yes, it's still an experience.
So it's all experience. Even when the experience changes radically from what we're used to being something like, if you take certain drugs, that experience, the shift from feeling localized to a oneness experience, which is why a lot of people take drugs, because it sort of changes the experience to something that feels much more harmonious and oneness-like. And it's an experience. So anyway, there's a significance in making sure that we come to see it always as experience, is that so we don't go suddenly running around thinking this is reality, and then when we come back to the body, we will say, oh no, I've lost it. And one day I will be back into reality again, and what reality is going to look like is a oneness experience. There's a big mistake there, and then what happens is we think that enlightenment is a oneness experience, because enlightenment is coming to see reality, seeing things as it really is. And so if we think that that is reality and this is experience, then the ingrained assumption is, oh, this is error. Experiencing life from subject-object point of view is the error. And one day I will live life in a oneness experience as consciousness, impersonal consciousness. And life delivers those awakening experiences, but they're not enlightened living. They're an awakening experience for certain aspects of consciousness and the nature of life to be seen. And one of the things that can be seen in it is that life is all an experience arising in consciousness. Even this experience is essentially all arising in consciousness. And the oneness experience show us that, what you are is consciousness in which everything arises. The assumption then is, one day that's how life will be forever. I will live in a oneness experience. And that's not what the peak experience is meant to be showing you. The peak experience isn't meant to show you. The peak experience is what it is. And then we can add an assumption, I had that experience, and that is, that's what's spoken about in so many books, and therefore that is the state of enlightenment. So if we then change it and say, no, that's not reality, that's experience, just a different experience. This is experience. And so when life pulls us back, then the emphasis on a oneness experience being present can fall away. And often a lot of suffering and seeking is where people are attached to a oneness experience happening again. They're waiting for it to happen again. And this teaching says, actually what we're really looking for is happiness. Happiness for the human being is continuous, unbroken peace of mind. Peace of mind is disturbed by the presence of suffering, guilt, blame, pride, worry, and expectation. So what enlightened living is the end of suffering, which is peace of mind. And enlightened living, which is the end of suffering, doesn't have to take the form of continuous oneness experience. So, yeah, that's why I think it's important to call a spade a spade. Call an experience an experience. Even a oneness experience is an experience of oneness.
That's what a oneness experience is. Like that's what people call a peak experience.
When the consciousness becomes decentralized, delocalized. So in meditation, effectively, when the localized sensation falls away and there's a much more broad, that's probably a subtle oneness experience, because there are some oneness experiences that are so crisp in what is contained in the experience that it's less subtle than the witnessing type oneness experiences. But that doesn't make it any better, just it's a crisper, let's say, oneness experience. And some things can be revealed more obviously in the really crisp oneness experience. It's an experience that is designed to be what I'm calling a crisp oneness experience. Then you have the experience that you described in the meditation, where everything sort of became delocalized, the sense. So that's called sense withdrawal in yoga, when the senses fall away in meditation. So effectively, you're not really hearing anything in what we would call the external environment, which in meditation, then there is no external environment. The senses have fallen away. And there's just this present with everything is presence. That's another experience. And it's what you could call a form of oneness experience. And then this experience is what we can call an experience of duality, but fundamentally, the experience of duality is still experience, and the oneness experience is experience. It's just the content is different. So awakening really is there to show us the nature of experience as being objects recognized by awareness. And even duality is fundamentally, the experience of duality is fundamentally a non-duality. It's the content that makes it, the way the content is experienced makes it a duality on the surface, but fundamentally all experience is non-dual. So you can't not have all experiences non-dual in nature. You can't not have a non-dual experience. Anyway. I think that's lunchtime.